The only little blip in terms of upbeat for us has been the immigrant population coming to Syracuse over the past 10 so years. And then with the previous presidential situation, there was a decrease in immigrant people coming from all over the world. So now I think you'll start to see another uptick with this current administration, probably. I don't know, but that's my historical reading of it. So, see, I want to wait for Anthony because I don't want to have to repeat. So we'll wait for a few minutes. He said he was going to be here, so that's something that came up and I didn't hear from him.
I pulled some numbers off the site for population. And I looked at the
off which site? I'm sorry.
The Syracuse population. I looked at several different places, but they had the population of Syracuse in 2010 at 145.
Right.
And in 2020, it's 141.
Right.
So we've lost, I think it's 2.9% or something like that drop. Are those accurate, even though, I mean, should we be looking at 2000 or just from the 2010?
Well, I think we need to look at the new census that comes out.
Well,
That's what we have to go by.
Yeah.
Okay.
That,
to the best of my knowledge, no one else has that data. It's a function of, I think, lower immigration numbers, number one, but people not wanting to be counted. Fear of deportation I think it's affected a lot of major cities across the country. Unfortunately, people are fearful of being deported. That's my own reading of it. And the city itself has been aging. First, let me ask, I guess, for Anthony, let me just go around the room and why don't you just tell me a little bit about who you all are, and then we'll get into the specifics of it. So, Bruce, why don't we start with you? Give us a little background and share with your colleagues.
All right. Originally from New York City. Came up here because of a job, and was hired a teacher. And this is exciting to me.
What part of New York City? Bronx? Brooklyn? Bronx?
Near Yankee Stadium.
Oh, really? I'm a Yankee fan, and this has been a tough year.
No, I'm not, but that's another story.
Yeah, that's another story.
My father immigrated to Youngstown, Ohio, so I became a Cleveland Indian fan by genetic coding.
So welcome. Glad to have you. Paula?
Okay, so I grew up on the Onondaga Reservation. Actually, I lived on the south side for a long time.
Okay.
Middle Street. And then I grew up on the res. I moved to Washington, D.C. for 22 years. And then moved back home in my mid-30s and raised my 3 children here.
Oh, fantastic.
And worked and started a couple businesses, little things on the side, and I've been here all along now. So it's been almost 30 years I moved back, and this is a wonderful place to have a life.
Thank you for your willingness to serve as well. And I'm glad you moved back.
Yes, me too.
It's a wonderful city, by the way. Graham?
Sure. My name is Graham Lusky. I moved here in 2004 to join the math department at SU.
From where did you move from?
Immediately from Toronto. That was supposed to be a one-year position. I had jobs previously in Kansas and Nebraska, California, and Portland, Oregon. But I'm here since 2004, raising a family here. I became the chair of the math department this year, which when I told my colleagues I was doing this, they're like, but you owe your life to us.
One needs to have some diversion.
Yeah, it's a hobby.
It's a hobby. Molly?
I'm Molly Lisco. My family has deep roots on the north side. I grew up in Minneapolis, but in 2008, when I graduated college, I just did when I'm young, and I moved to the north side with all my extended family, and I've been here ever since, and I did a lot of fighting.
Fantastic. Anthony?
Anthony, aka Tom Cole. I am a retired educator in the Syracuse School District. I have lived in Syracuse for 40-something years. I look forward to the opportunity to work with all of you and the others that will be coming on board to make sure that we do what's right for the city.
Where did you teach over the period of time?
I taught at Delaware Elementary School, and then I was an administrator at Smith, Salem High, and then I was a district police.
Thanks for your service to the kids. It's, that's part of why I got involved in politics myself, so I really appreciate your service to the kids in this community. Larry, you know that?
Larry Novak, I'm a retired family doctor. Actually was born in Syracuse and came back after education in '77. Practice for a couple of years in Syracuse. Happily retired.
Happily retired. Well, thank you.
Before COVID.
Yeah. Amen.
I actually was born in Syracuse 70 years ago. And I've lived here all my life with the exception of some military time and a little bit in Connecticut when I was on a job. But my home has always been in Syracuse. I lived right off of Newell on Berger.
Oh, yeah.
I started at Crowley Street and went to grade school, and then I went to Clary and Corcoran, and I graduated from Corcoran 50 years ago. My wife was a Corcoran grad. My kids all graduated from Corcoran. I have 3 married kids and 6 great grandkids, and several of them still live in the area. So I've been in and around for years. My dad was a custodian in the city school district, so I used to shovel coal with Levy. And he was a fireman on Brighton Ave when McKinley was over there before it became McKinley Brighton. Right.
I lived there.
So, yeah. So, and, you know, several of the guys I worked with were from the res, so, Carl Sprague and Gibson's, and those, I worked with those guys for years, and still see Sheldon on a regular basis, so. This is my home.
Yes.
That's great. So thank you for still being here and being part of it. It's great. It's fantastic. Jonathan?
I'm John Hamlin. I was born at Syracuse Memorial Hospital. It's now Krause. Until my family was born in Cupola. But my kids were born there, and that wasn't the case. After my parents lived on Spring Street, and then they proceeded to move about 24 different places throughout my childhood. We settled in Baldwinsville at the end, where I went to high school. I went to the College of St. Rose in Albany, where I met my wife, Robin. She's the public.
I'm the public.
meeting. And in 1994, I took the test to become a police officer. I purposely took the test here, even though we were living in Albany at the time, because I wanted to come home, and I was going to drag her with me. So I went through the hiring process in the summer of '94. In September of 1994, I was sworn in as a Syracuse police officer. In July of '95, we bought our starter home on the north side of Syracuse, and 26 years later, we're still there. And we both felt she's a teacher in the district, so we both felt it was important to live in the city where we worked. I retired in 2018 as a captain from the Syracuse Police Department, and keep myself busy. I worked for the post office for a couple of years during the holiday time, and last year I was a supervisor for the census. So take those census numbers with them, see with a grain of salt, because it was very hard to get people to cooperate with the census in the city. So I can't offer any insight as to how many more people there might be than what we're going to see as numbers.
It's a real shame. It really is.
And the pandemic didn't help, but it was a slog. So now I'm still retired and have nothing better to do. I was a history and political science major in college, and I'm very excited to sign up for this, and even more excited to be selected. I've never won a lottery in my life. First raffle I've ever.
Well, thank you for your service to the police department too, and for coming back home. And Robin, thanks for coming and being here. Where are you teaching?
I'm the music teacher at Fowler High School.
Oh, are you really?
Yeah.
How's that going?
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
No, it's always good. It's good to, we're gonna have the kids back in front of us this year, and I'm excited for that. We're gonna be able to do a musical again, and we do really fine musicals. Not gonna lie.
That's awesome.
Excited.
Did they change their format? Are they a technical school now or one of the?
Yes.
Yes, they are, aren't they? Yeah.
PSLA? Is that what it is?
Yeah, PSLA. It'll always be Fowler.
Right, it'll always be followed.
Mayor, I have a question on this sort of conversation we've been having regarding the accuracy of the numbers. Are we held rigidly to what the census finds, or is there some way of estimating legally, estimating what we've missed in which neighborhoods, or we can't indulge in that sort of subjective analysis?
According to the ordinance, the idea is to take it from the census information. However, if there's some way, and maybe, do you go by Jonathan or John?
John.
What John is suggesting and saying, it's something we could possibly explore. And so, before I get into that, let me just tell you how I came to this too, just so you know who I am. And again, thank you all for being here and taking time out tonight. So as I mentioned, I served on the council in the mid-80s. Well, I was born in Carthage, New York, and I'm a little older than you. And so I'm 74 years old, and I have lived here since 1960. I moved here, I was a sophomore in high school. I went to Most Holy Rosary. I graduated in 1964, and then I went in the Navy in the mid-60s and served overseas, which is enough said from my experience. I was in a little bit more than 3.5 years. I got out and was mature enough at that point in time to be able to go to college, and perhaps last, which I did. So I went to school at SUNY Oswego, and then later in life I went to graduate school at RIT. And so public service has been my joy, my hobby, my love, and the city of Syracuse as well. And so I currently live now on Euclid Ave with the students, not far from. So it's a wonderful neighborhood. I'm very blessed. As I said, I served on the Common Council. The last time we had, in fact, when I was on the council the first time, I voted for and pushed for with then Councilor DeFrancisco, then becoming Senator DeFrancisco, for term limits. I believe strongly in those, and I'm not here to tell you my beliefs. This is all about you all, but at least in the beginning here, I will be the coordinator. So how I came to do this was that when I was asked to run for city auditor after I'd been out of government for a couple of years, and when I took office last year, I was informed that the previous auditor had conversations with people about organizing a redistricting commission. I knew nothing about it, to be honest with you, so I kind of inherited it, and I have been trying to piece it together to the best of my abilities, and following the letter of the law, which I do, because I don't want John to arrest me. So, so the ordinance is the guiding principle. I've kept the council out of this as required, and I will keep myself out of it. So So part of what we would like to do tonight is to kind of have a little bit of what's the next step. I put together the notebooks for you, and hopefully that helps. You all have my email address, and the phone number is on there. So if you go away from the meeting tonight and you've got questions, please feel free to email me or call me. Those who know me as a city councilor know I'm very good about constituent service, so I get back to you right away. I thrived on that, and I believe in it. So if I can be of any help as a resource to you as you proceed, please let me know. To date, we have followed all the guidelines outlined in the ordinance, and now you all will begin to proceed. The importance of this, and I'll speak to it now as put on my former counselor hat, and also a citizen and has lived in the city since 1960, pretty much 1960, other than service and other college. So one of the things, we just went through a primary election, and we had 6,200 Democrats turn out, and I don't know how many Republicans. I don't remember the number, and I don't care which party anybody's in. It's never had a bearing on me. Even though I'm registered as a Democrat, they beat me up pretty good over the years. So, but I'm still a Democrat. But the point being is that the participation rate is so poor on a federal level, state level, and local level, and so. The expectation, I think, of the people, even though I wasn't originally included in the conversations about redistricting, was the hope and the expectation that if it was warranted, lines that would be redrawn that would engage more people in the process of voting and politics, because, as you've all heard the cliche, all politics are local. And so it really is important to get people involved. Secondarily, one of the other reasons I think it's very important for all of you and the work that you're going to do, and the other 7 members who will join you, your colleagues, is that the county legislature talked about doing some redistricting and then came up short in their decision making. And so what you all do, I believe, is a catalyst for how something can work when the citizens are engaged and involved, and it's not threatening. So hopefully, if the city redistricting can be a success, and I'm sure with all of you and your various backgrounds and the others that will join you, I'm very optimistic that we can do this. So I say that only to preface it is that you can be as public about this as you want to be. So there is importance in, I think, being able to make sure that as you work through the process, that you keep the public informed about what you're doing. So that, in fact, inviting people, and I'm assuming you've all read the ordinance at this point in time, and so that you can see that there's clearly steps about having public meetings in the districts. And it takes a lot of work to get people out to those public meetings. So it says on paper that you can have the public meetings. It doesn't say anything about how do you get people to come and attend these public meetings. Now during COVID, that would have been very difficult. And hopefully with God's help going forward, we won't have that problem in terms of not being able to have public meetings going forward. So I just want to give you a little bit of that background and information and the importance of what it is that you're doing. And as I inherited this position, I jumped in it full bore because I believe in it, and I'm really personally grateful, and as a politician grateful to you all. Number one, for living in the city that I love dearly. Number two, that you were willing to serve, and number three, that you will set an example for hopefully the county to move in that direction, because I think it helps our community as a whole much more so. And you know, the reality of it is there's really not much difference in all of us. really isn't, no matter where we live, black, white, brown, yellow. I mean, there isn't. And I think those, like you said, Robert, you came back, you wanted to put your roots here. John, you came back to live here. Tony dedicated all those years of teaching kids and hopefully inspiring them. Larry coming here as a medical doctor and helping. And Graham, hopefully you inspire some of the students as you teach to want to stay here and do some things. And from the nation, Paul, I really appreciate you stepping up. And Molly, you said you got roots here. That's it speaks volumes. And Bruce, you won't hold it against him. He's from the Bronx originally, or Cleveland Heights, or wherever you ended up.
The Bronx.
Yeah. So the notebook, as I said, I put together. There's enough room in there to add tabs. I put some paper in the back for you to make notes, whatever you need. In it, if we kind of walk through that for a minute. And you'll see in there that I put in the ordinance, and then there's information on all of you. You all have each other's email at this point in time. I also put the list in there of the 52 remaining and a breakdown of that, and also a copy of the districts as they're drawn now. I'm sorry, I couldn't find one that had the streets. I've been looking for it, so I made myself a note, and if I can find one with that, I will get that to you all as well. There's bigger versions of it, but I couldn't figure out how to get it in the notebook, but I can email that to you once I figure out that. And then as far as, let me stop there. 2 counts. One is there's an old Chinese proverb, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, you should listen twice as much as you speak, and I've already violated that. Is there any questions that any of you have right now, or you see the agenda that's there? This is really meant to be very informal from the standpoint, you all have to begin your work, you have to decide on a date, you have to decide on how you want to proceed. I don't want to direct it, I'm leaving it up to you to have that discussion tonight about how you all think that you want to proceed. I'm only here to be a resource to you, to help organize that. Any questions?
Yes.
Yes, John.
There's a provision about staff and legal counsel. Is it incumbent upon us to advertise for a lawyer and the staff, or would that be something your office would put, I don't know, put an ad in the paper, on Facebook? I haven't hired anybody in a long time.
Right. So, what's that?
Sorry, I suspect that there isn't a budget for such things.
No, there's no budget. In fact, there was, as I said, I inherited this, and when so we are on a fiscal year that runs July 1 through June 30th. And when I came into office, they said, well, you have to do this in X, Y, and Z. And I said, well, I inherited a budget mid-year. There's no monies in here for it. So I was able to get some money transferred from the Common Council budget into the auditor's budget so that I could at least perform the public newspaper ads and those kinds of things. But in terms of, I'm meeting with the Corporation Counsel lawyer tomorrow to discuss staffing and because he's the one that was involved in the drawing of the ordinance. Legal counsel probably could be provided by the Corporation Counsel if needed. Number one, Corporation Counsel right across the hall from us is our city attorneys. They represent both the Common Council and pretty much everybody, but sometimes there's a conflict, and so there's external lawyers are hired. But I'll get clarity on that. From a staff standpoint, in terms of any work that you need, for the short order, just count on me. I will find a way to get it done for you. So don't worry about that part. Yes, Paul?
There was directives that were not to discuss this with anybody else outside of our committee. unless it's in the public forum.
Right.
So when you ask us to try to drum up, interest in this is just in the process. But because I've already had several people approach me, oh, congratulations, but I'm being very careful not to go into any detail. Is that really what we're?
Yes, and the idea, what I was talking about in terms of getting the public is, once you all have done the work, the idea of getting people out to public meetings to talk about this, that's where I'm saying you're going to have to communicate in some form or fashion about it. The list that I gave you of the 52 remaining names, those are for you to look at, not to publicize. Although, in fairness, you saw I assume most of you have seen the city website where I had it put up on every time we had an applicant and how many were qualified and how many came from each district that were qualified or not qualified, and their ethnic and gender breakdown. So that is public knowledge, okay? So, but again, as you traverse through this, if you have any questions as to what you can and can't do, just contact me and I will answer it best I can. Wait a minute, Graham first? Do you have a question?
No, you got it.
Okay.
Two things. First, my bona fides, I've been here since '77. So, Bronx was way back. My kids were raised here. Just thought I'd mention that.
Just kidding.
And the second thing, I've forgotten, so it's okay.
It'll come back.
It'll come back. It's a
Usually
small
does.
thing.
Tony?
So, I guess I'm assuming that the common council considers that this ordinance is a major factor to promoting voting. Are they considering other factors? Because I believe that this might help, but I'm not sure that this is the only thing that is not encouraging people.
Let me try to answer that as best as I know it today. The first part of your question, at least as I interpret it, is that I don't know what the common councilors are thinking about in terms of voter turnout. I've not discussed any of that with them, particularly because I was not, per the ordinance, I was instructed not to have any conversations about that, generally as it relates to redistricting. Secondly, my understanding of this was originally intended and directed at the county legislature. And failure to get them to move, the city felt that they could do this. And there was a desire to look at this and to do it as well. And I think the city leads in many ways, good and bad. The city leads in many ways. And so I think it was the feeling of that group, as I was not involved in the initial conversations, but my takeaway is, the feeling is that the city has to lead once again to show them, guess what? This is okay. This is not harmful. This is not going to be problematic. And third, my editorial comment is, as I said, I worked very hard on term limits, got beat up, and got voted out of office as a result of it. But you know what? I still believe in it, and I think we should have it on all levels. It's good enough for the President of the United States, it's good enough for the rest of us. It's my own personal opinion. Sorry for the editorial comment. Yes, Graham. Did that answer your question, though, Tony?
Yeah, yes, yeah. You had said that earlier, so.
Right. But don't, sorry, that was a corporation counsel, the person that's through this, she was waiting to. So, but I encourage you, as you're going through this, the idea, one of the ideas of this is public engagement. Not only voting, but running for office and being involved. So don't let what the common council is or isn't doing guide you, you collective you, and what it is that you think you can accomplish here by virtue of what the work that you're doing, would be my suggestion to you on that. Graham?
Thanks. Maybe a slightly technical question. So there are the 5 council districts.
Yes.
But these are subdivided. There are wards and there are polling districts. There are smaller and smaller. We're not responsible for drawing those lines. Is that true?
That's true.
So who draws those lines in the end? Somebody has to come along after it and redraw those as well, right?
So there are election districts, EDs, there's wards, and then there's town council districts, The only one that doesn't have those districts are the school board. They run at large, basically. So the election districts are done by the Board of Elections, and they're set that way. So one of the recommendations might be to research that further and see if there could be some recommended change for that, for those. Okay?
And that's when it gets at what
I would maybe ask for all of us to consider, based on the directive also, that we are not to, we are to use documents for this endeavor that are collectively seen and have to be like identified. Like, I can't go researching off something and making all these opinions without sharing it with everybody, right? Isn't it a common knowledge base
Oh,
that
absolutely.
we're gonna use to do this? So maybe you could think of some place to save or deposit. You're gonna give us census data, but there'll be other things that we'll read. But we need to at least have the same knowledge base, right, to consider as we go forward.
Well, absolutely. In my thought processes was that in putting together the notebook, you may do your own individual research. And so you can put that in, you print it off and put it in. For instance, when I first got into it, I looked at the city of Austin. I looked at a number of different cities across the country and what it is that they did and how they did it. Believe me, it varies from very well-funded operations to ones that are a little less engaged in terms of support. So any research that you do, you're certainly free to share with your colleagues, your fellow colleagues on this. And the easiest way to do that in this day and age is digitally, so that's what I would encourage you. But you may want to print off different copies and bring them. And again, you all can decide how you want to have a meeting. It's got to be a public meeting. And as I wrote in the email, we were doing virtual meetings, but the governor said any public meetings now have to be in person. So when you're collectively going to meet, you need to be in person. And you can choose where you want to do it. You don't have to do it here in the common council chambers, but I thought it was a central location and easiest for you to do. And then I can be here, at least temporarily, to be a resource for you. But anything that you research, feel free to share with your colleagues. If you find something interesting, ask them, share them, let them read it. And then come to the meeting and discuss.
Regarding picking the next 7 members of the commission, will you give us access to their applications, or do you just go from the spreadsheet?
So that's one of the questions I have. The corporation council person I needed to talk to about this has been out for the past couple of weeks, so I didn't get a chance because it was one of the questions I was unsure of. And so what I sent you was some of that information. How much of what other personal information they shared, I'm not sure yet how I have to handle that, but I'll let you know.
I actually had the exact same question, because it says that in addition to just the names and, male, female, and where they live and ethnicity, was they also shall be chosen for their relevant analytical skills and ability to be impartial. Now, there's no way that we can glean any of that from a list of names.
Right, but it also, I think, if you read it further, it says that you have the right to just to decide. It doesn't have to be on their analytical skills. It can be, I can't remember the exact word.
Well, that was, in the beginning it says, the but word, and I work in specifications all the time, so shall and should
I know.
mean much more to me than maybe somebody else. If it says shall, then we will do it. And shall, those are words that are going to cause me to stumble.
Sure.
Because it's, I don't know how we can do that without more information.
Some of the applicants didn't fill out any additional information. the qualifications or disqualification categories led us to, first of all, being a city resident and the voting records and all that information. So some people chose not to offer any additional information of that 52. So my question really to the council, because originally I was going to share that, and then I thought, well, am I putting anybody in an unfair position because they didn't add any additional information that would skew or influence you collectively to not want to look at this person because if they didn't provide any of that data. One of the key ingredients of it is, as I interpret it again, is geography and gender and ethnicity. The intent was really to have that represented. So the first 8 names that were drawn were random. We did it in a public drawing. But the other 7, as you know, you have more of an opportunity to look at male, female, black, white, brown, yellow, and all of that to determine what it is that you think you have as a group already and what represents the city that you're trying to look at to redistrict.
If we know someone, do we recuse ourselves
If you know someone,
on the list?
I don't think so. I wouldn't think that that would be reason to disqualify.
Not disqualify that person.
Not to recuse yourself from that.
Yeah.
I know you. I know John from being on the police department. I don't know him. I know Tony from being in the school district. So this is a small town. We're all one family here.
Understood.
So I don't think that that necessarily would, if you can make an argument to that person, whether you know that person or not, and you can make a substantive position on why that person or what that person brings to the table for discussion, have at it. That would be my interpretation.
So, I was just going to add, or if you know some good reason why you should.
Right, it's a good point. Yeah.
But we do have to keep in mind the things that we cannot disqualify people on. I took the time to read the Voting Act of 1965, and there are very specific things that we have to not acknowledge or factor in. And some of it is right down to, they had to have put, like, to vote, you had to have completed the 6th grade. It doesn't even have to be in the major language of English, as long as it was in the states and in the colonies, right? So there's these other things that I think, not just like, I know a person on there, and she would be a wonderful member, but when I think about the larger context of wanting to have a quilt of a true cross-section of the city to determine this, I keep in mind that also, because it's not going to always be about the upper thought process that we're going through. We're trying to make voting fair and legitimate across these 5 districts.
So you bring up a good point. I think it's germane to what it is that you all will do, is that, so God bless you for reading the Voting Act of 1965.
I fell asleep twice.
When I went to college after I got out of the service, and I was taking a social class, and we had to take the voting test that was given to the state of Alabama, and we all flunked it. Mm-hmm. None of us passed it. That stayed with me. So whatever it is that you're researching and thinking about, it's incumbent upon you to share it with the group as background information to kind of proceed. That's the way I would and again, if there are questions that come up, again, you know me now, and you email me, and I'll happily work with the Corporation Council to try to answer those, get those things for you. Tony, before you did, Robert. Yes, Tony.
I guess what I was thinking is, would it be, as our resource, would you encourage us to consider a criteria for this random selection of the following 7?
I think I will have to pass on that. I think it's up to all of you. I think, you know, you seem like a lovely group, and I mean that very genuinely. And it would seem to me that you all have very varied and interesting backgrounds, and I think you all come together and you talk about that. I think that's what you do. If I'm in your shoes, not that I could ever teach for 4 years, but if I were in your shoes, that's what I would do, to say, okay, as a group, let's talk about that and see, rather than me. If you get hung up on something, then you shoot me an email, and I'm happy to check with council to help with that. Robert?
There's a lot of questions that pop in as we're going here.
Absolutely.
Where we get our information. I spent hours going through the city of Syracuse, undercounty.org, and that's where I pulled out I looked to see who the councilors were. I looked at the district maps. I looked at the voting and the polling sites. I've been part of, I'm a poll site manager and a machine specialist for 9 years. So I vote. I'm there every election and primary, and I just did the one in the south side of the valley where we come from. People vote. We had one of the highest numbers was right down there.
I'm gonna go look.
Look, because we were about 13% that voted Democrat in the last primary. So we vote, and when I sit with my fellow Democrats, we get along extremely well. Every person, and we treat everybody, but I don't see how drawing those lines is necessarily going to cause more people to vote, because they're all within the districts. We're all broken down by the county into where we go, where we poll.
Well, this is where a guy like Graham comes in handy. One of the reasons,
yeah.
Mathematically, again, separate it up. Don't worry about your response. Again, this is my interpretation. It's not up to you to worry about getting people out to vote. That comes later. What you need to do per the ordinance is to look at the districts as they're currently drawn and see if the numbers make sense from a more of an equal representation of the numbers, and also where they are. Graham's point about the wards. So, so when I was city councilor, I represented what was, I guess I'm the only city councilor ever, now I think about this, that's ever represented 2 different districts. I represented the 1st district when I was a younger man, and then I represented the 5th district, which is Eastwood and East Side. But where the boundary lines are, sometimes it doesn't make a whole lot of sense in the wards as they're drawn. You'll see if you look at a bigger map, and maybe in the next meeting, I used to get the big map drawn by Department of Transportation of the council districts, and you could see that there are some areas within some of these wards where there's really no residents. It's a lot of commercial or vacant land, but nonetheless it's drawn in that area. So population-wise, I think that's where you really need to be focused on, not necessarily getting people out to vote.
And I was just speaking to that because
I
didn't see that as to be our charge.
Okay.
Now, for Graham, I took the basic population of 145. I went and I saw the breakdown of the city, and white is 55%, black is 30%, Asian is 7%, mixed is 1%, and others is. So mathematically, I could say if we have this many of this and the male-female thing, we could meet that criteria.
Mm-hmm.
If that's all we're going with.
The trickier one is the communities of interest. This is really hard. And first thing we have to do is figure out what they are. So this is the part where I was looking today at the redistricting effort for Dayton County, Wisconsin, which is where Madison is.
Right.
And they've got a website where they ask the people of Dade County, tell us where your community of interest is. Tell us where your people, for whatever definition of the word your people you want to use, are, so that we can try to keep those intact, not draw lines through it. That's the sort of thing that we would need help from the city to do.
Yes.
I know there's no budget, but there's a website that already exists. So, and there is software out there in the world that it's not terribly expensive, but it may be commercial, that will let people draw these lines and tell us where the communities are.
So 2 points for that, if I can. First of all, thank you all for doing some background research. And don't let the fact that there's no budget hinder your thinking. I will find the budget for you to do what you think it is that you need to do, or purchase the software. I think I have the respect of the common councilors. They obviously counted on me to do this, so I feel comfortable in finding budgetary dollars to make happen what you need to do. I think it's excellent that you look at other communities that are perhaps similar or not similar to us and find ways that, you know, it's like anything else we do. When you do a research paper or anything, it's best practice. I mean, find best practices out there. Again, I think one of the guiding principles of this, or the intents of this, is that we find a way to make it successful for the city to use as a basis to make the argument for the county. We have to, so again, I apologize for my editorial comment, and that's what it is. But I believe it's important that the county do something similar to this for better representation. We all have to do a better job about getting people out to vote. We have a mayoral election coming this year, and if the primary is any indication of the voter participation, we're in trouble. And whatever candidate you're supporting, I make no judgment of that, but we really need to get people engaged. And what I see the Redistricting Commission part of is we're one of the cornerstones of that. It's not going to solve all the problems. It's not going to be the panacea, but it's a cornerstone. And I always tell my children, you have to have the art of the long view. And that's what I think this is about. This transcends the time here, many years from now.
You said the last auditor, Marty Masterful, right?
Yes, he was.
He got this ball rolling. I know there was
No, he did not. It was.
put on him.
It came. As I understand it, it were really generated from the Board of Elections
Oh,
and some interested citizens saying, you know what? How can we do better? And so they met, and then they tried to figure out, well, okay, if we do this, who's going to do it? So preliminarily, I guess they engaged Marty in this discussion, the former auditor, and but that was over a 1.5-year discussion. Then it went to a public forum for a vote. They had to get it organized enough to get it on a public forum. Similarly, at least my understanding when I was on the council years ago, and I was a champion of the term limits, we had to organize people, and we had to organize enough to get the legislation drawn, to get on the local law done, to be able to have it on the ballot for people to vote. And they voted.
What I'm trying to remember back, this was a referendum in 2019.
Yes.
And I remember voting for it, but there were articles on .com and other places. I have this vague memory, and I don't have moments to research it, but was SRC or Welch Allen Foundation involved in those initial conversations? Is that how this came in?
Not to the best of my knowledge. I know nothing of.
They're a potential resource for us.
I never.
They're all involved in public policy. So.
Not that I'm aware of. I've not heard any of that.
Like I said, spring doesn't work like it used to.
No,
A
no.
couple of years ago.
What it isn't my understanding that really we're not supposed to have any influence from a commercial or for-profit center at all.
Right.
None of those factors are supposed to come into this discussion. It is strictly about the citizenry, right? The population of citizenry.
The idea of getting the citizens engaged, and what Tony was talking about, it, I mean, we draw the district lines, but the voters choose to vote or not. It has to do with engagement, it seems, in the process, so that these public meetings generate public interest. And the idea, as you had said, about trying to figure out what a community of interest means, especially given the shift of people from the last census, from the last drawing of the lines, that people might have input that we need, that might be at least prior to our deciding. I don't know whether in fact the process is we decide, we draw, and then we ask for community involvement. We might need community involvement prior to that in order to figure out what people think of in terms of their own community of interest.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, we're mandated to have 5 public forums, so we will, but it's kind of like, how will we package it to get them in? And I don't even know if it's really, like, so I live in the valley, my community of interest isn't the valley, so I don't know what that really has to do with anything. It's where I live, and it's trying to keep the flavor of a community, right? We're supposed to be looking at population as trying to define the boundaries of community as set forth in these districts. That are very kind of, like, I know my district because I physically live there, but I know the near west side so much better, but it's still my district. So it's kind of interesting that while we are drawing these lines and land masses, it's really about the people that are there, right? That's our whole thing is a contiguous body that will have a like interest.
Has
Is
that
that
changed?
correct?
Has there been a fluidity in terms of the contiguous area?
Do you know what, now that we're talking about 20 years of data, there probably is, because we're saying, we just heard that 10 years ago it wasn't addressed. So we're looking at 20 years, and in the last 20 years, we've had a massive influx of immigrants and other types of people that now, I don't know, but I just know that as a person that has a friend that's a foster family, they've had so much input, so much influx just in the last 10 years. So I can't imagine what 20 years does.
Oh, make no mistake about it. As I said, I've been here since 1961. 81 wasn't completed. We're about to tear down a section of it. So we've had dramatic changes. Again, keep an open mind, and you all interact with your thinking and the remaining 7, and just have every confidence. You'll figure it out. I have every confidence. You'll figure it out. And you will be the example that we can set forth. And something that, as Graham mentioned too, is so looking in Wisconsin, just look around the country. I personally did. I didn't know what had been, I read probably 25 to 30 different communities and what they did. And they're very varied and instructive. And I picked up the phone and called people, and I had a conversation with them. And so, again, don't limit yourself. Eyes wide open, art of the long view, and trust yourselves, and it will work. Trust me, it will work. Yes, Molly. I wondered when you were going to raise your hand.
All right, so as concerning the agenda for tonight, are we not picking the new people because you still have that question around
Right.
what additional information?
Correct.
Okay.
You're not picking the people tonight. What I wanted to do was to get, I want to make sure that I'm following legally what it is that I can release and do. I tried, as I said, when to put it up on a public website, every applicant we had, the ethnicity, the gender, who was qualified, who wasn't. I've been through the list and determined manually those that don't qualify, so that if there were any questions, I was able to answer those. And so I feel very comfortable with that. But I wasn't sure about what information could or couldn't be released. And I apologize, I should have done this beforehand. But I wanted tonight to bring you all together, give you what data that I have, and let you see me in person and not just somebody get from an email. I'm a guy who likes to talk and see people face to face. And then you all need to figure out how you want to get together, when you want to get together, where, who, what, when, and where. That's what it comes down to. And you all have each other's emails now, you have the list, and you can figure out how you want to proceed with that. And I'm only here to say, okay, you need some help with this. I'll try to do it if I can. If I can, I'll tell you where I think we need to go to do that.
Can you provide a sort of common listserv so that we don't have to do reply all whenever we want to talk to each other?
Sure. Happy to do that. Any one of you could do that too, so.
Observation, this is a very interesting group. I'm blown away that we were picked out of a hat.
Actually, it was a basket. I wanted to use a Yankee hat, but I didn't. I used a basket.
But my thinking, I guess, is just listening to what you're saying is a lot more complicated than I was thinking. I see 5 districts in Syracuse. Syracuse boundaries haven't changed, and we're just going to work these lines in these 5 districts. Each district has a council. So other than moving the lines that would benefit one councilor over another, I mean,
Not benefit, balance.
I don't want to say that, but one of the things that would happen in polling is when I'm at the site, people who come and say, well, this person isn't on this list. I said, well, you can't vote for that person in this district. He's over there.
Right.
Well, I want to vote for him. This is your district.
Correct.
So is that, other than changing those 5 council lines, what, I'm not quite following it, and forgive me, I just don't understand how this ultimately massaging these lines is going to do anything other than move some neighborhoods that would then have more area or population for that one council.
Graham's got an answer.
Okay.
It has to do with perception. When people perceive that their vote is going to count. You know, like in a federal election, New York's going to go to the Democratic every time. So you might feel that your vote is wasted, or your vote is superfluous. And part of what I think they're driving at here is to minimize those. Make people feel like their vote counts, and hope that that sense.
Because I vote in the valley, that area is 2-to-1 Democrat Republican. So I watch twice as many Democrats come in, and they are very powerful in bringing voters in. I see voter after, they just come in van loads. So I don't see it. And you're talking perception. So I see it the opposite. I'm not up in the north side or in other places that may not have that. I see those people coming in and they want to vote and they're voting and they come back every election cycle.
So not to do a lecture on this, but I have been to lectures on this, that the technology for drawing these lines is so good now, is professionally used at the federal level to draw electoral, to get 51% in all of these districts, so that we get all these districts in, you guys can have that. That sort of thing becoming well known, followed, of course, is becoming possible. But as it's become well known, more will be moving forward, even as it's going anyway.
Right.
So if we can do it in a way, so if we can do it in a way that is public and transparent, that did this. That's the idea. I don't know if any of that's true or gonna work, but I think that's the idea.
Yes, Robin, go ahead.
I know I'm just the public, but.
No, you're
this
not
is-
just the public. No, you're not, so don't say, please.
This is a room of very lovely people, but you in no way represent the classroom that I will see in September. And I think if you want to have buy-in, personally, the committee needs to reflect the community. And
It's very, very true.
and not only that, but also, it's almost like a show of good faith to young people. To say, you do matter, you do count. This is why you're taking your government class your senior year. This is, it's a huge, huge undertaking and a huge responsibility.
I have a question.
Sure.
Can we identify political affiliation in those applicants? Because I am living the reality that the numbers say that half of us voted red and half of us voted blue. The numbers of this country are split right down the middle. And I think that representation should hold true to this also. And that goes against my personal opinion, but the numbers are that. And I think to keep everybody involved, especially the ones that think their vote doesn't count, red or blue or whatever, I think that can we identify political affiliation?
So my response to that is no, but I'm not sure. And my response, this is why, is because if you look again in the county and you look at a certain district within the county, you'll see that the registration of Democrats may outnumber Republicans in that particular district. However, it doesn't mean that Democrats all vote for the Democrat. They vote for the person, number one. Number two, you will also see there's an increased number of people who don't register in either party. So don't mix it up. They're independent, not independence party people. So what the redistricting is not, as I interpret it, is not Democrat or Republican or getting out the vote as much as it is whether you're Republican, Democrat, non-enrolled in a party, or an independent, or you're part of Working Families Party, whatever it is that you choose to be where you want to be. The importance of this is to think of it as all people being included in the process. So whether somebody's Democrat or Republican doesn't, in my opinion, I can ask that of the Corporation Council, but I don't see that would be germane to this to this work. What party somebody's registered in. The idea is, again, to try to get more of a balance so it isn't skewed numbers-wise in one district over the other. One other sidebar to that is, to your point earlier, Robert, about, okay, this person comes in and they want to vote for Native Maroon. Okay, I'm representing the 5th district, but they live in the valley. They can't vote for Native Maroon based on their geography. But what they can do is they can vote for Robin, who's the counselor at large, or they can vote for Tony, who's running for the school board. They don't have geographic boundaries. So there's an opportunity for people to choose at-large candidates for the school board or the school district, judges, et cetera, et cetera. It's only the common council districts that's limited. Therefore, the idea being is, are these districts drawn that meet a balance of numbers for people to have some, so it's not skewed one way or another. The 5th district has 15,000 people in it, and the 1st district may have 8,000. That's really what the balancing is intended to do.
Do we have those figures? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
We have these right
Board of
now.
Election has that information.
So we can go on and find out how many,
Well, you can not only do they have them for the districts, but they also have them by ward. So you can look at, and EDs, the breakdown as Graham was mentioning earlier. Yes, Tony?
I know Molly had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I passed. No, go ahead, Molly, go ahead, please.
It wasn't a question, really, it's more of a statement.
Go ahead.
Just around, even if at the end of this, and it all comes out in the wash, that blinds don't necessarily change that well, I don't really think that that's necessarily the point. I like what you had said in the beginning, that the city leads and what we're seeing in our county is really problematic. And so there's something special about seeing something on a city ballot saying, do you want an independent council? And we all vote yes. And now here we are serving on it. Like, that's a pretty cool thing. And it's like walking the walk. Like, we say that this is important. Look at the numbers and follow what the population and the needs demand. And so we're doing it, even if it maybe doesn't need to be done or whatever. So we're doing it, should be done, and people have asked for it to be done.
And I
100% there. I mean, that's well said.
So,
But I need to look at those numbers.
Yeah.
so I wanted to follow up with what Bob was saying. And that's why I was asking about your suggestion or your thoughts about what this commission should consider as far as determining the additional 7 people. I would encourage us to consider criteria so that we can have a reflective body and not just something that other people say or whatever.
You don't need
They don't really reflect me, you know. So I would
6
suggest
men, 2
that
women.
we strongly consider using that sort of process to determine the additional 7.
But you have that option for the ordinance to select whomever, however the criteria you use to set, as long as they were qualified to be on the commission in the first place. And relative to the 6 and 2 women, there were more white males that applied. So you can say it doesn't represent the community, and they were randomly drawn per the ordinance. So, and there were more males and there were more white males that applied. So the numbers are going to be skewed that way because there's more who apply. Unfortunately, in that regard, I shouldn't say unfortunately, as a white male, I don't want to be unfortunate. I have my rights too.
Well, fortunately, we have to balance it out, now that we know.
Right,
If we can use those numbers.
and that was the intent.
Constrained by, but we are constrained to that pool of people who are not required to be representative of that pool, we're required to be representative of the city.
Exactly. So that's, to me, that's very flexible. And also, I keep doing that. I like that one in the first place. So, yeah, the ordinance, follow the ordinance. That's what I do. You know, I'm a city councilor in my past, and I'm a city auditor. I follow the ordinances. That's the law. That's what they voted on, and that's what I follow. But it's not, as I read the ordinance, it's not restrictive. To Tony's point, to Robin's point, and to Paul's point, you have a lot of flexibility in deciding who these other 7 commissioner members are. And Molly, thank you for your point about it, because as I said at the outset, that's where I'm at with that, is that lead, you have a chance to lead. Syracuse has a chance to lead. Yes.
Yeah, I was, I'm sorry, this doesn't speak well of me, but.
No, it's fine. You're human. I do it every day.
Yeah.
I go down cellar, I can't know what the hell I went down there for. So don't worry about it. It'll come back to you.
And I'm looking at the racial breakdown of our remaining people. We're gonna do the best we can. And we'll come up with a commission that hopefully is equally balanced. But there isn't a single Asian person on here. And in the 26 years that we've lived in our neighborhood, when we first moved in, I had an Italian neighbor and a German neighbor on the corner. And they were very old, they died. Their houses are now occupied by, a lot of our neighbors are from Myanmar and Africa and Burma. So it's incumbent upon us, I believe, we'll do the best we can to get a racially diverse commission, but then we go out and we have meetings where we speak to the ethnic groups that are not represented by our commission. We go to them and say, this is what we're doing, and we need your input, because we're seeking your input, because you live here and you're valuable to us as a city. So I think we can, obviously we'll do our best, but we need to go beyond that and reach out to the people that are not going to be represented because they just didn't apply.
So let me address that because it was a point of concern for me as well. As I said, I was not involved in the original drawing of the ordinance. I would have said something to that effect. By virtue of what was in the ordinance and who would qualify or not qualify, it is somewhat restricted based on what you're saying. So I get the point. So how you all decide to engage then individuals or ethnic groups is up to you all. They may not be on your eligible to be on this list because of the criteria of qualifications, but that doesn't, in my mind's eye, prohibit you from gathering that information as you think and process and how you want to draw the lines to make sure that they're included in it.
I don't think having a lack of representation in a sort of, arithmetic way invalidates the group of 15 when it's all collected, and we're all going to be doing our best job. What I wanted to say is the type of hacking and cracking technology that's used in gerrymandering on a larger scale, I think it probably is not the case here, but it is the case in the county, apparently, because that's why we're trying to model behavior so that the county doesn't do that sort of anti-democratic thing. And I'm wondering whether there's any example locally in the 5 districts that have been drawn over the last 20, 30 years that need correcting by us, where there has been, in fact, a more conscious attempt to manipulate voting populations within the category of every district having roughly equal population, but to distribute that in a way that favors the political party. I mean, is there an indication of that as impetus for having an independent commission?
To the best of my knowledge, no. And I go back, first time that I ran for office in the mid-'80s, I was not aware of, nor had I heard prior to then that had occurred at the local level. Had it occurred as it relates to the state, Senate, and Assembly? Yes. On a federal level? Yes. I'll give you an example of how it happens in the state Senate. One of my former colleagues on the council was running against the incumbent John DeFrancisco, and the next time the census was drawn, they drew the district right around the person that was running against him's house, so that person wouldn't be eligible to run in that district. And don't get me wrong, John and I are friends. He and I worked on the term limits years ago together. And then I gave him help for spending 20 years in the Senate. What happened to the idea of term limits? But so nothing here that I'm aware of that has ever been the case.
Because otherwise we'd be looking at a bigger corrective than simply, moving it this way or that way in order to equalize population distribution. If there's been crimes committed against democracy.
So, one last comment, if I can, Karen. So, I'm Lebanese, and I'm a big fan of Earl Gabon, and he, in one of his books, says, no one's a prophet in their own time. And I think to the point that Molly raised and that I mentioned at the outset, is that while you may not be able or be thinking that you're going to have that much of an impact or change that much that dramatically, it is a start in our community, which will hopefully have some impact on the county, which will hopefully have ultimately some impact in New York State. We are the only city east of the Mississippi, as you've probably read, that is even doing this. Think about that. So you all have a chance, in the additional commission members, to make history here. The only city of our size east of the Mississippi that's even looking at this. To me, that's huge. And it may not be in your time, but you'll see the fruits of that. And for people long-term, the kids that Robin mentioned. So, I'm sorry, I don't mean to get off on my bandbox, but I believe it. Graham?
That's very cool, I actually know that. To Bruce's point, so I had, I mentioned there's software, a lot of really good software. There are mathematical measures of how gerrymandered something is. None of them is particularly good, but they're enough to kind of get an idea. And there's software that will compute these things for you. And so I reached out to Dustin Sargent, the county, there are two
He and Michelle, the
commissioners,
Board of Elections.
and I asked him for the data, so I could feed the data into this website and get an answer. Are we looking at historical inequities already in the map? And he said, well, I could give you 2010 data, 2020 data, we won't get those connected. So we can do that sort of thing, I think,
Yes, you can.
but not now, not yet.
Again, Richard Dreyfuss was in the movie Baby Steps, Dr. Bob. I can't remember the name of the movie now. But the baby steps are getting organized amongst yourselves. Don't try to solve it now. This is just my advice. You choose to accept it or reject it. But the idea now is to, you all, because you're the first elected, you have a chance to think about it. You have a chance probably to look at and read about it a little bit and get yourselves oriented. And then you can then decide, okay, based on what your thinking are, and your thoughts are, how is it that the next 7 choices are going to reflect what the collective you have think is important. And then the 7 are chosen, they bring something to the table, and you listen to them, and it may change the course of how you're proceeding from that standpoint. And so, again, following the ordinance, you can see the timetable which you have to do this. So, this month, by July 31st, you have to pick the additional 7 members. So it's incumbent upon you all to start to work, to think through that, or continue to work. I apologize. To continue to work on the office. Molly, did you have something to listen?
No, it's just listening.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Do we select a chairman and a vice chairman after the
Yes.
other 7 are
Yes.
here? So right now, we're still kind of under your...
So not only do you, you're with them.
Well, yes, yes.
I'm never, I'm not.
Yeah, I didn't mean to get you.
No, I'm just kidding you.
Could you give me some research shortcuts? What cities did you pick to look at?
I don't
Like
wanna
that
prejudice
became
you.
so much.
Oh, I don't want to prejudice
Okay.
you, no.
I just didn't know.
It's
if-
fun, it's fun to do.
just to look.
Because my orientation might be different than yours, and I don't mean to be disingenuous
No,
here,
no,
or
no, I get it,
disrespectful.
yeah.
But you can just plug it in, you'll get more,
That's what I'm afraid of.
yeah, you'll be up at, like I am, at 3 o'clock in the morning looking at this stuff.
What's the percentage of Democrats and Republicans in the city, either registered voters or who voted for the common council positions? Just so we know an idea of the party division.
I don't want to prejudice you that way. But I
Yeah,
can
that's
tell you,
that's
it's
common
about,
knowledge.
it's about 5 to 1, I think, Democrats over Republicans at this point in time. I think there's only something like 11,000 eligible voters that are Republican. But again,
And there's independents.
with all due respect, I'm the same age as you are, so I can say this to you, okay? Don't think in terms of Democrat and Republican, because there's a lot of non-enrolled people out there who equally need our representation. And they choose not to be in a party for lots of different reasons. So think of it as a broader audience. Don't think, I don't mean to tell you what to do, but please be broad-minded. That's the best I can say to you. Don't, Republican, Democrat shouldn't even weigh, in my opinion, shouldn't weigh into the equation. You're really talking about people, and people who are eligible voters, regardless of their party affiliation. It doesn't, you know, look, I've run for office several times, and I never looked at it from the standpoint of that, because what am I going to say to somebody if they're not registered to the same party I am? I can't represent you. I'm not going to. They're constituent.
I understand.
So Grant, you said that you looked into Dayton, Wisconsin?
Dayton.
D-A-N-E County? Is that in Wisconsin? Yeah. Okay. And then, I was gonna say, I mean, I know I'm sort of one of the retirees, so I got all the time in the world. But I know that others are working, so I'm thinking, could it be possible would it be possible for us to be times before July 31st to make the selection of these own votes?
Could we meet in a week?
If you saw on my agenda, the next thing I had was your next meeting. So you need to set a date. So Tony, thank you for bringing that up. Getting right to the point that I hadn't got to yet. So I thank you. Yeah, you all need to decide. July 31st, by July 31st, you have to pick the remaining 7. So you've got 19 days from now to do that. So you, however you choose to meet.
When will the applicant data be available? You said there was some at the main website, that you have some applicant data there?
Well, what's at the website is the same listing that I gave you.
Oh, it's just that data?
That's 52,
Okay.
right.
The question was whether he's allowed to distribute this additional information that
Right.
they submitted to their application.
Like, we do need more information.
I'll have an answer for you tomorrow morning. I fellow just came back and I saw him in Hall today, and we're going to talk more about that. I'll get an answer to that.
You want to set a date for the next meeting?
So Paul, to your question, we could probably meet at least time if that worked for everybody.
It's exactly.
We'll have an answer to that.
This works,
6
this
o'clock
works
on
for
Monday
me.
works for some reason. Does it work for you, Mom? So then.
Yes, I had anxiety when I was trying to put out the date and the times and how to fit 8 of you together.
Yeah, it's
Sorry.
15 is going to be hard.
Pardon me?
15 is going to be hard. Getting guidance that all 15 of us can meet in these public, so many public.
We have to have at least 9.
So you have to have a quorum. I mean, the first process is 7, get the additional
Oh,
7.
yeah. I mean, beyond.
Right, then you elect the officers, and then you have to have a quorum. So 9 is the minimum.
Must all the attendees be in-person attendees?
Yes, if it's a public meeting, it has to be. Can't do it virtually.
You can't miss too many either.
Yeah,
Oh,
well-
you'll get the boo.
It's all right there in the ordinance, the guidelines. So my encouragement is for you all to say tonight, okay, today's the 12th, when you want to meet again, and where. Like I said earlier, who, what, when, and where. You don't have to come here, but this is a public place, and you're welcome. And again, I don't need to be here part of that discussion. You all can, if you want to be here for a meeting, but I can arrange for that. Somebody just needs to let me know.
Is there another, I know there's conference rooms in this building. Is there any place we can sit around the table and see each other in City Hall or City Hall Commons?
Yeah. City Hall Commons may be an option. I don't know what they're doing with the atrium. I'll check into that to see if that's available. Does everybody know what City Hall Commons is?
Yeah, it's right over there, a little bread.
It's the Flatiron type building. It has an atrium built by the Key Bank. So I can check into that and see if that's available. But I'll need a date. So you want to pick a date, and then I can find out about locations.
The 19th, or not gonna be the 6 o'clock?
Yep.
Everybody, Larry, Tony, Rick, Robert?
One more thing, let's say things
Only
go.
one.
Just one, sorry. Let's say things go
Only one.
swimmingly with Corp Council tomorrow, and you're allowed to disseminate that application.
I'll send it out to you.
Okay, I was gonna say, they might be reticent to have you send it out electronically.
I don't know.
Yeah, if they are, I'm sure I can come pick it up and I can deliver it.
Oh, yeah, or I certainly can mail it. I can't do it. I don't think that should be done. So I'll find out. So that's the one thing, in terms of Democrat, Republican,
Yeah, we did.
so it's just a matter of any additional data. But again, I want to leave you with the thought, not everybody answered all of those questions. They answered sometimes the minimum, whether they were qualified in terms of voting and all that. So I just want you to be aware of that. Yes, Mom?
Is it possible or would it be helpful if we had like a Google Drive that we all had access to?
Yeah.
And then we can just share information, and if you get this information, you can dump it in a folder, and then we can all just.
You want to set that up? You know how to set that up?
Yeah.
Yay, Mom. I wasn't there volunteer.
Okay.
So if you set that up
Sure.
and include the
And
list,
then I'll invite everyone.
invite everybody.
Okay.
If you want me on it, fine. If not, that's fine too.
Yeah, okay.
Does it make sense to have minutes for these meetings, or that's not how it's done?
No, any minutes and notes that you want from it, I will record basically what I discussed here or what questions basically tonight for this meeting. But beyond that, I'm trying to step away from it. Not that I don't want to help, but I don't want to be leading it in any capacity. I want you all to own it. So you become your new family, your extended family. So, and I'm blessed to get to know you. So. Okay, if there's anything else, I think you can go out